kid from the bush who grew into a legend in his own lunchtime, former SAS soldier Michael J. Malone has seen it all. This is Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, hosted by the man himself, Mick Malone, along with Toby Malone, as they examine this long, storied career in the Australian Special Forces. Join us each week for behind-the-scenes insight, exclusive readings, and brutally honest truths from a true original. Welcome to Never Die Wondering. Welcome to episode 39 of Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words, a podcast that explores the life and legend of Michael John Malone, OAM. My name is Toby Malone, Mick's son and co-host of this podcast series, joined by the man whose name is in the title, Mick Malone. G'day, Dad.
How you going, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
Like I say, any better, I'll be twins.
Yeah, that old saying. My daughter uses the same phrase, so she knows. Good. So yeah, I mean, and this chapter we're starting to get into the first time there was a big move back east. So I mean, any better you be twins in that as well. That must have been a big moment when you decided that for the advancement of your career that maybe you have to leave Perth, drag the family with you, and go back across the country. How'd you feel about that?
Well, it was a pretty big deal. Duntroon was a P posting. You know, it was one of the most important postings of all because of the influence you could have on the future officers.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, what a wonderful time for my kids it'll be. And your mother, she was always very industrious and started her own business there,
Right.
and away we went.
Yeah. I mean, how did so? Mum had never really left Western Australia for any
No,
extended period of time, so didn't take much to convince her, or she was on board
no,
from
no.
the jump.
She was quite happy. She's always been a very adventurous woman,
Mm-hmm.
liked to travel,
Yeah,
and
my
going with a family across the country.
mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yeah,
Pretty big deal.
my memory of it, because we were living in a house in East Fremantle uh, for all of my life, essentially, up until 1983. So first 5 years of my life, and I remember we moved to Cardinia for a short time because we'd bought a
Mm,
block there. Um, and so yeah, I remember saying prior to leaving East Fremantle, when can we move house? Moving house sounds like a fun adventure or fun. And I would learn to rue those words because we moved every 2 years for the next 7 or 8 years.
pretty
But
well, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, it was an adventure, and Georgia and I certainly treated it as such. But even now, my wife marvels at how whenever we whenever we box up a room or have to unpack from construction or something like that, I unpack faster than anyone she's ever seen, and because I get things out of boxes and onto shelves and onto the walls, and all because of the time we had moving around. Because you only get 2 years here, so you better get things out of boxes so that you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
start living. So yeah, so yeah. Well, how about we get into the chapter? We'll talk a little bit more about what we did in Duntroon when we get there. Today we'll be reading chapter 36 of Two Ranks on the Road: 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone OAM, published in 2024 by Imprimatur Books, Perth. This chapter, entitled RMC Duntroon, covers pages 265 to 270 in the print edition. The ebook may have slightly different numbering, so follow from the beginning of the chapter. As we read, the body of the text will be read by author Mick Malone. Whenever we come across a footnote, we'll pause in the least disruptive way possible, and I will read the footnotes. And now, without further ado, Two Ranks on the Road.
Chapter 36, Royal Military College, Duntroon, 1985. A lot more work. Back in WA, I had some quality time with my family. My job as SSM at 1 Squadron continued, and I found I was much more relaxed. Around the middle of '84, my former CEO, Reg Beasley, called me from DSAF and informed me that I'd be posted to Royal Military College Duntroon, ACT, for the following year. My role was to run the pencil over the likely young officers who showed promise as troop commanders in SASR. At home, this news was received with quiet reflection. On the one hand, it was going to be a great adventure for all of us. On the other, and sad moment because Joe's backstop, her mother Dawn, would be staying here in Perth. We considered whether to keep our beautiful house in East Fremantle or sell it. The latter got the nod.
Footnote, big mistake, as that house is now worth $1.5 million.
We bought a block in Cardinia on the southern side of Leach Highway and rented a house there to prepare ourselves for the great adventure east. This was a great idea because it confirmed we did not want to live in that area. It was around this time when Mick O'Byrne, whose sister Margot was a neighbour of ours in East Fremantle, came to me and requested SASR assistance with the rock concerts he was conducting at WA Institute of Technology, now Curtin University. He was having trouble with gate crashes and needed some muscle, for whom he would pay well. We reckoned the area and determined it would be a simple task. We put a team together and went out there on a Saturday afternoon. This first night was relatively simple, and Miko paid as promised. The following Saturday, the shit hit the fan as Miko booked the Church, a well-known and closely followed rock band. The venue could only hold so many, so once we reached quota, we were turning them away. The wildest amongst them decided to crash the place by climbing over the roof to the courtyard outside the hall. Johnny Matten soon put pay to that by cranking up a big fire hose and proceeded to hose them off the roof. Miko was most impressed. Sorry. Miko had a couple more concerts booked, which we handled with ease. At the end of the season, we all went our separate ways. It wasn't long before I got a phone call from a bar in the city, Carnaby's. It was a well-named gay bar in the eastern end of the city. Once again, I put a team together and away we went. This was a stunning departure from what I'd been used to. It was a real revelation. We were told by management to exclude rig workers and Indigenous men, as these would invariably turn up drunk and become pests. So we complied with this request. We ran the security for around 3 months till the owner decided he would put a few of his mates on the job. He paid us out and bid adieu, and there's no more of this stuff for me. We were to be in Canberra by early January '85 for the start of the academic year. I would be posted to field wing, part of first class team,
Footnote, the graduating class.
and attached to Kokoda Company. Everything to do with the bush was down to our small team, which included Ken Grub Johnson, MM. We planned exercises, organised transport and logistics, and all other related areas. We would see a lot of Majura range for range practices and other related aspects such as navigation exercises, weapon handling, camouflage and concealment, and various other static instructional periods. In the barracks, we would assist the younger members with assembling their bush gear. There were quite a few serving soldiers who had elected to be officers, and these would prove to be a great help in the bush. Although this was their fourth year at RMC, many of them were extremely sketchy on the basics of bushwork. Many of these would be posted to peripheral corps such as ordnance, catering, transport, while the arms corps, infantry, armour and artillery would get the best of them, and I would follow Reg's dictum to spot the good ones. The top cadet, BSM, was Bob Hunter, a likeable young bloke from Tasmania. Back to the family, it was time. He would have ultimately be commanding one squadron when the Black Hawk disaster occurred in North Queensland in 1996.
Footnote: This disaster happened at night on a CT training mission when one Black Hawk crashed into another and 18 men were killed in the ensuing conflagration. 15 of them were SAS men and 3 from Aviation Regiment. It was the greatest catastrophe the regiment endured. I discuss this in more detail later in this book.
Back to the family. It was time to pack up and vacate our rented house. We flew into Sydney and retrieved our car and trailer from the train. We drove down to Canberra. We were booked into the City Travel Lodge hotel while we waited for word on our married quarter. We were given a small but immaculately renovated married quarter on Wilton Road, Duntroon, just inside the back gates.
Footnote: the gun gate entrance onto Fairbairn Avenue, from which we watched Pope John Paul II's Popemobile pass by in 1986.
We stayed in the motel till our goods and chattels arrived, and the truck met the truck at the house and supervised where each item was to go. As was our custom, we had fish and chips on the floor. The kids were booked into St Thomas More Catholic Primary School in Campbell, close by. My office was in an old weatherboard school down on the road to the airport. Excuse me. As a team, we didn't spend much time there. However, as the bush beckoned, Duntroon had a surfeit of great playing fields, with rugby and Australian rules ovals being the main occupiers. I volunteered to coach the fourth grade rugby team, and it turned out we were the most successful team that year, having made the finals. The captain of my team was a young officer who graduated from Duntroon 2 years before, but was now attending the Australian Defence Force Academy, ADFA, studying maths. His name is Angus Campbell, and he's now the Chief of the Defence Force.
Footnote: his younger brother, Richard Face Campbell, was a member of the Duntroon first grade team. Their father was the great Wally Campbell MC, who made a name for himself in the Malaysian conflict. Along with Wally, I'd like to think I had some small part to play in their development.
RMC cadets had the most remarkable, inappropriate, but at times hilarious activities. One was the talk, tea or coffee, with the commandant. It was never meant to be, but it became the code for various juvenile pranks the cadets pulled on each other. One of the best I heard was a bunch of cadets would take over an old ablution block and seal it up, and they would select a suitably skinny cadet from among their group who would carry an entrenching tool and fit into a steel personnel locker. They would then proceed to flood the block to about 3 feet deep. A couple of junior cadets selected for this talk would enter the flooded room through a window wearing steel helmets and budgie smugglers. The senior cadet would be positioned in his canoe at one end of the room. The junior cadet would be down the other end and were instructed to submerge, helmets on, and swim to the other end. When they surfaced, the dude in the canoe would dong them on the head with the entrenching tool. Pointless, you say? Certainly was. Sorry. Another prank pulled involved a cadet who was going home for the weekend. His room would be locked and empty. A bunch of cadets would collect every newspaper they could find, retrieved from various dumpsters around the college. When the coast was clear, they would take it in turns to screw the paper up page by page and push the ball of paper through the window above the door. Needless to say, 2 days and nights of this activity ensured the room was full to the ceiling. When the hapless cadet returned on Sunday night, he had difficulty in opening the door. Fair dinkum.
Footnote: Richard Face Campbell is the repository of talk stories.
Life in the sergeant's mess was full on with the redoubtable Brian Jazzer Smith, RSM of Duntroon, and PMC of the mess. He called me into his office only a few weeks after I'd arrived and dropped a bombshell. He wanted me to be his mess secretary. I'd always avoided mess committees up to this stage, but somehow I was quite happy at the suggestion. It meant a lot more work, but it wasn't as if I'd lived out at Tuggeranong or somewhere. I lived on the base and had no use for the car. Besides, Joe needed the car to run the kids to and from school and get to and from Pialigo, where she set up her craft business, Truly Lois at Jeff and Rhonda Cleary's at Pialigo Plant Farm. Truly Lois was a franchise from Lois with Love, a creative network founded by Lois Marshall in South Australia. Joe had worked making handcrafts and teaching um, in the FLWL shop in Mosman Park, and so went into partnership with her sister-in-law, Kay Blue, in Canberra, who handled the business end of the bargain, while Joe ran the classes in all craft from fabric, floral, paper, folk art, and stenciling. The business was up and running very quickly, riding the revival of handcraft across Australia at the time.
Footnote: Joe later produced a book called Stenciling, a practical and inspirational guide to decorative ideas for interior furnishing, clothing, stationery, and more, which sold pretty well here in Australia, but when they released it in America, it went gangbusters, selling nearly 100,000 copies. Bravo, Joe. Her second book on stenciling was Wearable and Decorative Stenciling, Patterns, Projects, and Possibilities, which in my view was a better book, but never sold anywhere near the sales of the first one. And that was chapter 36 from Two Ranks on the Road, 35 Years of Australian Special Forces Service by Michael J. Malone, as read by the author. So a big adventure off to the ACT.
Yeah.
And Canberra was, I mean, much like Perth, we've talked about how Perth was a country town back then compared to how it is now, but I mean, nothing on Canberra, which is like a little village
Yeah, it
in the
wasn't
early 80s.
it?
Had you been there before? Before, like
Uh, I've
have they
been
had?
there quite a few times, but never posted there.
Oh, you've been there doing your the counter-terrorist stuff as well.
Yeah, we did all sorts of stuff out at Fairburn
Yeah, that's
RAF
right.
base. But it was a new experience for me to live there, you know.
Hmm. So Duntroon, to talk a little bit about what Duntroon's purpose is in the Australian military environment.
Yeah, Duntroon's the officer building establishment. A young bloke comes in, been selected on a review board to because of his academic results. They like the look of him. They give him a Guernsey in fourth class, which is the junior class, and he works his way up to first class for graduation, 4 years. And then ADFA next door, Australian Defence Force Academy, was basically established right next door. And the ADFA cadets would come across at the end of their degree in whatever they were doing and join the college in second class. So they've still got 2 years to serve. And we'd take them on, and none of them had any idea about the bush hardly.
Hmm.
There's a couple of good ones, but in the main they were pretty raw. So it was a bit of fun teaching people who have no idea about bush things, all sorts of things about weapon handling and cyclic rate of fire of M60 machine guns and all sorts of stuff like that, and then navigation, and it was just the way it was. And those young officers would graduate after 4 years and be graduated as a full lieutenant, two pips, and uh, they'd be whatever the corps they were selected to go to, infantry, artillery, engineers, or the non-combat um, non-combat corps like ordnance, catering. A lot of blokes wanted to go to catering because they saw their future after they got out of the army as running the Imperial Hotel in Adelaide or something, you know, just because they're experienced in catering.
Right.
Um,
And no one's shooting at you in catering.
no, well, not in the main. No.
Just get the cop the abuse from all the diggers.
Yeah. So that was our job, was to basically train them in being soldiers.
And then you were saying that when you were wandering around Duntroon, the Sandy Beret had a lot
A
of
lot of kids,
cachet.
yeah, they did. People used to look up and say, "Oh, Way Malone, um, sir." It's sort of weird getting called sir.
Yeah.
Like, I come from the most bloody non-sir unit in the army.
Hmm. Yeah, I have lots of
Never.
good memories of Duntroon. I mean, we grew up there. I mean, we were there for 2 years when I was 7 and 8, and because it's a very self-contained little suburb, um, there was really no reason to leave Duntroon with your friends. You'd all run around and build cubby houses and go. We go diving um, in the water trap at the golf course for golf balls and yabbies.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. All the kids did all sorts of things. And it was interesting spending some time in Canberra because there was a lot more army kids than anywhere else we were. So when we were in Sydney and when we were in Perth, we didn't really spend any time with army kids. But when we were in Canberra, everyone was army kids.
The other
Um,
good thing about being in Duntroon was the war memorial was just down the road.
yeah, that's right.
We used to go there every Sunday, remember? And that
Yep.
was our church.
Yeah, and even more so when we came back 2 years later because we were living only a block away. When
Mm.
we were living in Campbell. But we'll get to that in a future chapter. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of impressive blokes. There's some photos in the book here on page 267, a Kokoda company, and you can just holding up to the camera if you're watching it on YouTube, and some very well turned out blokes, including a young Mick Malone here on the end, and a lot of guys who turned out to be big wheels in the Defence Force, including the Chief of the Army or Chief of the Defence Force.
Yeah. Big
Yeah,
time.
yeah, pretty impressive. And then later in the chapter on page 270, there lots of photos of all the fun that was had um, around Duntroon, including a famous dress-up party that was had with where you went dressed up as Arnie Jack with a golden
We're all
box.
told what we had to come as.
Right. And yeah, and there was a very famous moment where you were dressed as Arnie Jack in a floral dress and a boxing glove, and mum as Flash Nick, and
In
then
flat in the Vic.
yeah, and then the other pictures of you looking all dressed up for dining in night, and then with your mum and dad who looked proud as punch.
Yeah, yeah. That was great to have them down there.
Yeah, I
One of the great.
very clearly remember them coming down. They came down in their caravan, I remember, and parked on the front
Yeah.
lawn, and it was a big deal.
Mm.
It's a big deal. So I'm sure
Well, they wouldn't be
I'm
able to
sure,
house.
yeah, I'm sure they were pleased that we were back over east for a couple of years.
Yeah, they were.
Got a chance to see us a bit. And then the other thing that sort of was a bonus about being in Canberra is that Mum's brother lived there as well with his family, and so um, we got to spend time with with our cousins Adam and Bronwyn who were living there at the time, and who were still there, both still in Canberra, and their mum Kay. And the next chapter will that takes a tragic turn, but for a little while it was nice to be able to spend lots of time with the Blues over in there in Canberra.
Yeah, it was. I like Canberra.
Mm.
Oh, God, sorry, mate. Morning phlegm, as it were.
Um, yeah, Canberra's good. It was a nice place to be as a kid. I don't know if I'd want to be there as an adult. Maybe, I mean that's not fair because I haven't been back to Canberra in 20, no, 35, no, 30 years must be. So I'm sure it's changed a lot. And it's a good place to with lots of room and lots of green. So yeah, so that's our first foray into a posting where we all wound up over at the other side of the country, and Georgia and I were both in booked into St. Thomas More's primary school, which is a tiny, tiny little place, and um, yeah, it was an eye-opening time. Let's say that. But
Yeah,
we all did okay.
you, you discovered rugby.
I did start playing rugby that year. That's
I
right.
think
I wasn't very good at it when I was 7, but
that's funny.
yeah.
Skipping around the field.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. At least I got involved.
He did, mate, and I was so thrilled.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all the time we have this week for Never Die Wondering. But never join us next week for the next installment in our exploration of Mick Malone's career as we get into the 37th chapter of the book itself, entitled England. If you have a copy of Two Ranks, read along with us. I've been Toby Malone, and thank you to Mick Malone for commandingly joining us on this journey. This has been Never Die Wondering, Mick Malone in his own words. For links to purchase your own copies of Mick's books, visit the show notes or mickmalone.com.au. This podcast is produced by Toby Malone, Joe Malone and Mick Malone, and engineered by Toby Malone. Theme music is The Happy Wanderer, the official SAS march, as reimagined by Cormac Malone and Meg Logue Malone. Yes, this is a family affair. This is a GM production in association with Imprimatur Books.